Okay, let's dive into this. Remember back in April 2025 when suddenly Marks and Spencer just sort of stopped working online?
Oh, yeah, it was quite something. Online orders just vanished, deliveries went AWOL, and apparently even paying in-store turned into a real headache.
Exactly. It felt like this strange mystery unfolding right before our eyes, messing up people's weekend plans, a proper digital blackout.
And the scale of it was, well, striking. It wasn't just the website glitching. It hit so many core systems, payments, logistics. It suggested something pretty deep had gone wrong.
Right. And that's what we're digging into today. We're trying to piece together the how and the who and really why this whole thing matters, whether you're running a business or, just trying to buy some groceries online.
So putting together what we know from the initial fallout,
Yeah.
during this M&S cyber incident, the attackers definitely got hold of customer contact info. We're talking names, addresses, phone numbers, emails, dates of birth, and importantly, online order histories too. But thankfully, it seems like the really critical stuff, usable payment details, actual card numbers, account passwords, they weren't compromised.
Well, that's something, I suppose. A small mercy amidst the chaos. And M&S did react pretty fast, didn't they? Telling everyone to reset passwords, warning about phishing scams.
Yeah, the standard but necessary precautions. Because you know those phishing emails start flying around immediately after something like this.
Absolutely. But it makes you think about the sheer impact. I mean, a giant like M&S having to pull the plug on all online sales. The financial hit must have been huge.
Oh, immense. You're talking immediate lost revenue plus the hit to their reputation. And the markets definitely reacted that share price drop was quite significant. Hundreds of millions potentially wiped off their value just like that.
Wow. And pretty quickly, a name started doing the rounds as the likely culprit, right? This group called Scattered Spider.
That's the one. Also known sometimes as UNC 3944 or Octo Tempest. And look, these aren't your run-of-the-mill hackers. They've got a reputation for being, well, pretty sophisticated and causing major disruption.
Okay, so before we go further, let's quickly mention that this deep dive is brought to you by Stonefly. They're leaders in things like enterprise storage, backup, disaster recovery, and AI storage
Right,
solutions.
and if you're concerned about security, especially ransomware, Stonefly offers ransomware-proof storage, including air-gapped and immutable options. You can check them out by emailing sales@stonefly.com to schedule a demo.
Good to know. So, Scattered Spider, who exactly are these guys?
Well, they kind of burst onto the scene, or at least became noticeable, around mid-2022. What's really interesting, maybe even a bit unusual, is their profile.
How so?
They seem to be mainly younger individuals, predominantly English-speaking, and based in places like the US and the UK. We could be talking teenagers, maybe early 20s.
Seriously, teens and early 20s causing this much chaos. It kind of messes with your image of, sophisticated cyber criminals.
It does. And initially, their main thing was social engineering, really leaning into techniques like SIM swapping, tricking mobile carriers to hijack phone numbers.
Ah, to intercept MFA codes and things.
Exactly. Plus, MFA fatigue, just bombarding users with authentication requests until they slip up. And, of course, your classic phishing emails and texts. Their early targets were often telcos and outsourcing companies.
But they didn't stick with just that, right? They evolved.
Oh, yeah, significantly. They quickly added ransomware deployment to their toolkit. And often in that double extortion model we hear so much about now.
Meaning they steal your data and encrypt it?
Precisely. They threaten to leak the stolen data if the ransom isn't paid, even if you could potentially recover from the encryption. It gives them extra leverage.
And they made big headlines with those attacks back in September 2023, right? The MGM Resorts and Caesars Entertainment ones.
They did. Those were massive incidents that really put Scattered Spider on the map, showing just how disruptive they could be to major operations.
So how are they structured? Is it like a traditional criminal gang?
It doesn't seem like it. It appears much more fluid, decentralized. They seem to use platforms like hacker forums, Telegram, Discord, places like that to coordinate. Less of a strict hierarchy.
Which must make them harder for law enforcement to tackle, surely, if there's no single head to cut off.
It definitely complicates things. Now, there have been reports of law enforcement actions, arrests even, targeting individuals allegedly linked to the group, so they're not completely ghosts.
But the group itself keeps going.
It seems so. The collective remains active, suggesting that taking out a few individuals doesn't necessarily stop the whole operation. Their resilience is notable.
And what's the main driver? Just money.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
It's financially motivated. That comes through data theft for extortion, deploying ransomware for big payouts, and sometimes straight-up cryptocurrency theft. It's all about finding ways to monetize that access.
You mentioned ransomware. They work with others on that. Like, they don't make their own.
Often, yes. They operate as affiliates within that ransomware as a service model, the RAS ecosystem. Think of it like they're renting the malware from developers. They worked with ALPHV Black Cat for the MGM attack, for instance.
And for the MNS incident, the name being mentioned is Dragon Force.
That's the current thinking, yes. They seem to have partnered with the Dragon Force RAS operation for this one. It shows their flexibility. They're not tied to just one ransomware family.
Okay, that paints a picture of who they are. Let's get into how they operate. Their TTPs, tactics, techniques, and procedures. Where do they usually start? That initial way in?
Right, initial access. And this is where their social engineering prowess really shines. They're, frankly, very good at it.
So phishing emails, dodgy text messages, smishing, is it? Pretending to be someone legit?
Absolutely. Crafting convincing messages to trick employees into clicking bad links or giving up credentials, but they go further. Vishing voice phishing is a big one for them.
Ah, so phone calls.
Yeah, phoning up employees, maybe posing as the IT help desk, sometimes using info they've gathered from places like LinkedIn to sound really convincing. They talk people into giving up logins or even installing remote access tools.
Wow, they really do their homework. And SIM swapping. How exactly does that work again?
Basically, they convince the victim's mobile phone provider through charm, trickery, maybe bribing an insider to transfer the phone number to a SIM card they control.
Ouch. And then any SMS-based two-factor codes go straight to the attacker.
Exactly. It bypasses a common security layer, which, really highlights why SMS isn't the best for MFA. You need stronger, phishing-resistant methods.
Makes sense. And MFA fatigue, just annoying people into clicking approve.
Pretty much. Flood the user with push notifications or prompts. Eventually, out of frustration or confusion, the person might just hit approve to make it stop letting the attackers in. It's surprisingly effective.
Relentless. You also mentioned tricking users into installing legitimate remote tools.
Yes. Things like AnyDesk, Screen Connect, TeamViewer. They might guide a user through a fake support process, telling them to install this tool for help. But really, it's giving the attacker persistent remote access.
And they install backups, too.
Often, yeah. Multiple remote access tools, just in case one gets detected and removed. It builds redundancy for them.
Okay, so they're in. What's next? How do they stick around? Persistence, right?
Persistence. Well, obviously, they use the accounts they've already compromised, but they also try to embed themselves more deeply. They might tamper with authentication processes.
Like how?
Maybe registering their own authenticator app or device to a compromised account. Or, more advanced, messing with single sign-on systems like Azure AD or Entra ID, adding a rogue identity provider they control. That gives them long-term, often privileged access that's really hard to spot and remove.
Okay, so they're persistent. Then they need more power, presumably. Privilege escalation.
Exactly. They need to move from a standard user account to something with more permissions, ideally an administrator. They use the access they have, exploit any vulnerabilities they find.
And you mentioned they misuse legitimate tools for this too, like security software.
Yes, sometimes they can abuse features in things like endpoint detection and response, EDR tools. Maybe using a remote shell capability that's meant for administrators. They also use techniques like access token manipulation. Think of it like stealing a temporary digital keycard that lets them access things as a higher privileged user or even the system itself.
Sneaky. And all the while, they're trying not to get caught. Defense evasion.
Constantly. They'll try to disable security software, obviously. They might tweak cloud settings to hide their tracks. They try to masquerade as legitimate users or processes.
That living off the land idea.
Precisely. Using tools already built into Windows or Linux or other legitimate software that's already installed, it makes their activity blend in. Much harder to detect than if they brought in, obviously, malicious custom tools. They'll also try to cover their tracks, obfuscating files, deleting logs, removing indicators.
Okay, so they're sticking around, getting more power, hiding. What about finding the good stuff? The discovery phase.
Right. They need to understand the network they're in. So they'll poke around, map out the cloud environment if it's relevant, scan the internal network. But here's something really concerning they're known for.
Go on.
They actively monitor the victim's internal communications about the incident itself. We're talking Slack channels, Microsoft Teams, chats, emails.
No way. They're listening in on the incident response.
Reports suggest yes. And sometimes even joining incident response calls anonymously. It lets them see how the defenders are reacting, what they know, and adjust their own tactics in real time. It's incredibly brazen.
That is. Wow. Okay, so they know the layout, they know what the defenders are doing, then they spread. Lateral movement.
Yep. Using tools like remote desktop, RDP, or SSH, and those compromised accounts to move from machine to machine, getting deeper into the network.
And then grabbing the loot. Collection.
Collection. Pulling together all the sensitive data they want, financial info, customer databases, intellectual property, and very often a key target is the Active Directory database file, ntds.tidit.
Why that file specifically?
It contains the hashes of all user passwords in a Windows domain. Getting that allows them offline password cracking and potentially compromises every account. It's a treasure trove for attackers.
Got it. So they collect the data, then they need to get it out. Exfiltration.
Exactly. Transferring all that stolen data out of the victim's network to servers or cloud storage that the attackers control.
And then comes the final punch, the impact.
Then comes the impact, usually deploying the ransomware like DragonForce in the M&S case to encrypt potentially thousands of systems, servers, virtual machines.
Especially those VMware ESX hosts you mentioned, critical for virtual infrastructure.
Yes, hitting virtualization hosts is common because it can take out many virtual servers at once. Maximum disruption. But impact isn't just encryption. It's the threat of leaking the stolen data, potentially deleting backups to hinder recovery.
And that weird tactic, filing regulatory complaints.
Yeah, that's a newer, quite nasty twist. Filing complaints with data protection authorities, for example, against the victim for failing to secure data, adding even more pressure to pay the ransom.
Unbelievable. Okay, so that's the scattered spider playbook. Let's circle back specifically to the M&S incident. How does that timeline map onto these tactics?
Well, looking at the reports, it seems likely the initial breach, maybe getting that ntds.didit file, happened earlier, perhaps February 2025. Then things went quiet, possibly while they explored the network and planned the main attack.
And the visible disruption started around Easter.
Right, late April, payment systems acting up, online orders failing. Then M&S acknowledged the cyber incident. Reports suggest the actual ransomware, DragonForce, was deployed around April 24th.
Which led to the full online shutdown on the 25th.
Exactly. And those disruptions carried on for a while. It fits the pattern. Initial compromise, reconnaissance, lateral movement, data exfiltration, potentially over weeks or months, then the final ransomware deployment for impact.
And the nature of the attack server encryption hitting VMware, the DragonForce name-it-all screams ransomware, even if M&S haven't officially confirmed it.
It has all the hallmarks, yes.
Uh-huh.
The operational impact was huge online, app, click and collect, deliveries, even warehouses affected. That points to a core system compromise, likely involving ransomware.
Plus the financial hit, the share price drop, the police investigation. It's a major incident. But M&S has stayed pretty tight-lipped on the details.
That's common, as we said. During an active incident and investigation, companies are often advised to limit public statements. But behind the scenes, in the cybersecurity world, the consensus linking this to scattered spider or octotempest is pretty strong.
What's the key evidence making that link so strong in people's minds?
Two main things reported. The theft of that Active Directory database, ntds.didit, and the specific use of DragonForce ransomware. Both are closely associated with Scattered Spider's recent activity.
And it just fits their overall profile, doesn't it?
It does, targeting a large, high-profile retailer, focusing on identity infrastructure, Active Directory, using ransomware as the final payload, hitting VMware infrastructure like they did with MGM, and the high likelihood that social engineering was the way in. It all aligns very well with Scattered Spider's known TTPs.
And DragonForce itself, you said it's relatively new.
Yeah, emerged late 2023. It's another ransomware as a service operation, does the double extortion thing. Scattered Spider using them just shows they're an adaptable affiliate, willing to switch ransomware providers based on, well, who knows, effectiveness, profit share, availability.
Right. Okay, so let's just recap then. We've seen a really significant cyber attack cripple a major retailer, M&S. All signs point towards Scattered Spider, this highly capable group known for sophisticated social engineering and ransomware attacks.
Their methods, especially targeting core identity systems and virtual infrastructure, cause massive operational and financial damage.
And this whole incident, it really shines a light on some worrying trends, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. Firstly, social engineering is still incredibly effective for getting that initial foothold. Secondly, the focus on compromising identity systems like Active Directory gives attackers pervasive access. And thirdly, the sheer disruptive power of ransomware against critical business functions is stark.
It really hammers home the need for multiple layers of security, doesn't it? Not just tech, but people, too.
Definitely. Employee awareness training is crucial, making people savvy about phishing, vishing, all those social engineering tricks, but also strong technical controls. Robust identity management, things like genuinely phishing-resistant multi-factor authentication, not just SMS codes.
Good point. And solid help desk procedures, right? So someone can't just call up and reset a password easily.
Exactly. Proper verification is key. Plus strong cloud security configurations, advanced threat detection tools to spot intrusions early, and, crucially, having well-tested incident response plans. You need to know what to do when, inevitably, something gets through.
It's not a matter of if anymore, but when.
Pretty much.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, maybe the final thought for everyone listening is this. Given how adaptable these groups like Scattered Spider are, constantly changing their game, how do we individuals, businesses, actually stay ahead? What proactive steps can we take that go beyond just reacting after the fact?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Continuous vigilance, investing in robust defenses, and fostering that security-aware culture are definitely key parts of the answer. And just a final reminder, this deep dive was sponsored by Stonefly. They're experts in enterprise storage, backup, disaster recovery, AI storage, and cloud solutions.
Right, and if you're looking for that secure ransomware-proof storage, including air-gapped and immutable options to protect against attacks like these, you can reach out to Stonefly. Just email sales@stonefly.com to set up a demo.